It's time for Point of View with Ms. Shirley Polk. I'd like to keep the whole world sing a simple melody. Good afternoon. Good afternoon. This is Point of View. Thank you so much for being with me. Dear God, as I sit before you to speak, I pray to you that my soul you will keep. And if I should die before I finish, I pray to you, dear God, in the name of Jesus, that any outstanding sins will be forgiven. Amen. This is Tuesday. It is the 18th of March in the year 2025. And wherever you're watching, at the time that you're watching, welcome, welcome, welcome. Today we're going to talk about chronic complainers. Let's get an understanding. Chronic complainers. Let's get an understanding. Have you ever known someone, or do you know someone that is constantly complaining about this, that, or the other? So we're going to try to understand them today. Whoever they are, whether it's us or them, we're going to try to understand today. And I'm using psychology today. And I'm also using, let me get my other here because I always want to get learningmind.com. Learningmind.com and psychologytoday.com. Okay, now what is a chronic complainer? Let's see about that, see what the definition is for a chronic complainer. Because I tell you, I'm pretty sure you know some people, whether you say it or not, that are chronic complainers. Chronic complainers are individuals who consistently focus on the negative aspects of situations and often exaggerate the problems. They typically exhibit a my way or the highway mentality, refusing to compromise and fixating on obstacles rather than solutions. The behavior can stem from a need for validation and attention, often leading to toxic dynamics in personal and professional relationships. Chronic complaining can also have psychological effects on the brain, contributing to a negative outlook on life. So, to manage interactions with chronic complainers, it's important to understand their motivations and employ strategies to maintain your own peace of mind. And that's a fact. You have to always remember to protect yourself and your peace of mind. Because if you don't, you won't be able to deal with yourself, let alone anybody else. Psychology today, how to deal with chronic complainers. And what they want and what they need are very different. And this piece was posted on July the 15th in 2011 and is reviewed by Gary Drevich. Reviewed by Gary Drevich. And this is Psychology Today. And Guy Winch, PhD, is the writer. So we'll get right on into it, talking about the chronic complainers. And our key points here that we'll bring out are chronic complainers do not usually see themselves as negative people, but rather as forever being on the losing end of things. A chronic complainer's perceptions about their hardships are deeply embedded in their personality and sense of identity. The next point, the best way to deal with the chronic complainer is to express sympathy and validation. And that's what they want. But reading these articles here, I understand why it's that answer is there and that option is there to give them sympathy and go on. Now, optimists see a glass half full. Pessimists see a glass half empty. Chronic complainers see a glass that is slightly chipped, holding water that isn't cold enough, probably because it's tap water, even though I asked for bottled and wait. There's a smudge on the rim too, which means the glass wasn't cleaned properly, and now I'll probably end up with some kind of virus. Why do these things always happen to me? Okay, now we have that example. So the constant negativity ensuing forth from chronic complainers presents a huge challenge for those around them. And nothing makes chronic complainers happier than being more miserable than their friends. Trying to remain positive, motivated, and productive amid a constant stream of complaints and dissatisfaction can try anyone's patience. And if you've ever been around a chronic complainer, you can probably see a little bit by your experience in here of what they're talking about. So, understanding the chronic complainer's mindset. We're going to talk about understanding the mindset. Now, despite how difficult their complaints are for those around them, chronic complainers do not usually see themselves as negative people. Rather, they perceive themselves as forever being on the losing end of things and drawing the short straw on a daily basis. Therefore, they see the world as being negative and themselves as merely responding appropriately to annoying, aggravating, or unfortunate circumstances. So, even those chronic complainers who do recognize their prodigious complaining output truly believe their unlucky lot in life more than justifies expressing their dissatisfaction to those around them. Now, after all, it is they who have been saddled with more problems and misfortune than most. So, I point here a survival tip number one. We're learning how to deal with chronic complainers, okay? And if we're one, then we're teaching other people how to deal with us, all right? So, the survival tip number one is do not try to convince a chronic complainer things are not as bad as they think they are or suggest they are. Overreacting to events and situations, okay? Now, let me do that again. Do not try to convince a chronic complainer things are not as bad as they think they are or suggest they are overreacting to events and situations. This will only compel him or her, to mention 10 additional complaints or dissatisfactions you have not heard about to give you a better understanding of how terrible their lives actually are. Now, understanding what chronic complainers want. This part right here is going to help us understand. Remember, we're digging into it. We're trying to understand. Chronic complainers complain to those around them because they seek sympathy and emotional validation. In other words, they want you to validate their experience, to tell them that indeed their glass was chipped, that yes, they were given tap water rather than bottled water, and that, in fact, they should probably get a good night's sleep so they can ward off whatever germs were embedded in that smudge on the rim. That's what they want to hear. They want you to sympathize and empathize with them and tell them just what they want to hear. Now, the second survival tip is the quickest way to extract yourself from a complaining soliloquy is to validate their feelings, express sympathy, which must sound sincere or it will not do the trick, and then redirect the complainer to the task at hand. For example, the printer jammed on you again? Gee, that's incredibly annoying. I know it's hard to shrug off those kinds of things, but I hope you can be a trooper because we really have to get back to the Penske file. Okay? So that's another point for us right there. So under next we're going to understanding what chronic complainers don't want. Here we go. Most chronic complainers truly see their lives as full of hardship and challenge. Some people's lives are full of hardship and tragedy, and we do know that. We don't play it off. We're not speaking lightly of it because we know that many people's lives are full of hardship and tragedy. Okay, but the writers and I refer here to people whose lives are actually not unusual in that regard. A chronic complainer's perceptions about their hardships are deeply embedded in their personality and sense of identity. Therefore, although they tell others about their problems all the time, they are not really looking for advice or solutions. And you know, that is a fact. From my experience, you can try and try to get a word in edgewise, and it's almost impossible sometimes because they go on and on and on and on. So, this right here, they're not really looking for advice or solutions. Many times they're not. Okay? Now, that's a fact. So, even when your advice would actually resolve a problem, chronic complainers will not be especially happy to hear it. Anything that takes away some recognition of their hardship will be experienced as threatening to their identity and even their sense of self. Therefore, they often respond to sound advice either by explaining why the suggestions won't work or by becoming upset that the person offering it doesn't understand how unsolvable their problem actually is. Man, this is on point. This is really on point from some of my experiences. Okay, the next survival tip here, tip number three. In the majority of situations, there are some obvious exceptions. You should avoid offering advice or solutions and stick to sympathy and emotional validation. However, even chronic complainers sometimes encounter authentic problems and make legitimate complaints, and that's a fact. So we don't look at it lightly. We know that legitimate problems and complaints do come up. Okay? So in such cases, when distress is warranted, offer sympathy followed by brief but pointed advice, and it will probably be accepted and appreciated. So you have to be wise when you're dealing with people, okay? You have to be wise, you have to be intuitive, you have to know people when you're dealing with them. And that's why it says be wise. Be as wise as serpents and harmless as doves. That's scripture in the Bible. Okay, that's psychology today. So we finished that. Oh, that is so good. That is really good. Now we'll go to our Learning Mind site, learningmind.com. 7 signs of chronic complainers and how to deal with them. We probably won't be on a whole hour today, but I want to get this in because so many of us sometimes say, what can I do? I've tried this, I've tried that, I've offered advice, and then they just go right over it like we didn't say anything. And just like they said, he said in psychology, today you offer suggestions, and they say, yeah, but that's not going to do any good. So anyway, let's go learning mind. This is Becky's story, and she posted this December the 8th, 2019. It's so good that these are all really still effective and up to date. So do you have people in your life that can't help but have a negative outlook? These people are chronic complainers. They can be a dangerous drain on your energy with their constant negative attitude. But there are ways to manage them so they can't take away your own joy. And sometimes you just have to back away. Sometimes it gets so rough, you just have to, like, hey, dismiss yourself. Really. But we're going to see what they're saying here, what she's saying here. 7 signs of chronic complainers. Number one, they are not surrounded by positive people. Okie dokie. A person who isn't positive and cheerful is unlikely to ever be friends with such people. Real life isn't a 90s sitcom. A person who complains about everything won't attract people with a positive outlook. If you're wondering if someone is a chronic complainer, look no further than the company they keep. Wow, that's me, and it's true too. Number two, they never compromise. They never compromise. A chronic complainer will find even the smallest errors in anything. If someone suggests an idea they don't like, which is almost always, they'll be sure to tell you. Oh, yes, you've encountered people like that, haven't you? Well, I know I have. And hopefully I haven't been one of them, all right? The chronic complainers operate a my way or the highway. You see how these two sides agree? So I really like this research because we know that it's good. Okay, this is wholesome information and it's good advice. It's good for us to know. Chronic complainers operate on my way or the highway mentality. If something isn't up to their standards, they'll moan and refuse to compromise. Only their way is good enough. Have you ever dealt with people like that? Number three, they're focused on obstacles. They're focused on obstacles. A sure sign of a chronic complainer is their intense focus on the obstacles they face. They have a constant negative outlook on the world. When even the smallest things go wrong, they become hyper focused on it and complain about it endlessly. Number four, they insist they're being realistic. They insist they're being realistic. Now, a chronic complainer will always insist that they are not being negative, but are actually just realistic. They'll accuse everyone else of being naive and look down on those who want to be positive as being ignorant. My goodness. Chronic complainers are convinced that their critiques of the world around them are just factual observations. Seems like you cannot win with the chronic complainer, huh? Number five, they're perfectionists. Someone with such a negative view on the world and a tendency to never agree with anyone else will likely be a perfectionist. They have the drive to improve everything and be the best at all times. This is due to their view of everything around them as not good enough. When they don't see any positives, they'll strive to make things better, even when to the rest of nothing needs improving. Mm, mm, mm. Number six, they'll make everything seem difficult. Have you ever met someone who insists things can't be done without even trying? These people are probably chronic complainers. They have such a negative view of the world that they insist so many things are simply impossible. They would rather complain that something is impossible than take a moment to think it through. Without a positive mindset, a chronic complainer will only see the difficulties they face, not the possible silver linings or solutions. Number seven, they're rarely truly happy. Talking about chronic complainers. I think we've learned something today, haven't we? A chronic complainer never seems genuinely happy due to their negative mindset and constant search for faults. They're rarely ever feeling truly content. It's a miserable existence to see the world as constantly flawed. I can imagine. So, this outlook isn't realistic, it's only focused on the negatives, and it's impossible to feel true happiness if you're too busy complaining to notice the moments of joy. Okay, next we're going to learn how to deal with chronic complainers. All right, how we're going to deal with them. Don't try to convince them. See, it's all agreeing with psychology today. Number one, don't try to convince them. I mean, you just be spinning your wheels. Just spinning your wheels. Well, look at this like this. Why don't you try this? This could work out. Oh, no, no, no. Sometimes it's just best for you both if you don't try to convince them to be more positive. Not only will it save you from a possible argument or heated debate, but it could be more important to them than you realize. Sometimes chronic complainers are just outright negative people, but some may be genuinely down on their luck people who need some validating. Now, when a person has nothing but complaints, they might be struggling with their negative mindset because it is true. Some people have had so many trials and tribulations, so many problems, till they've developed that mindset that nothing good ever happens for me. And then they get afraid if something good happens because they're wondering, okay, what next is coming? What's coming next? I know it can't be good. So when you hear them complain, try validating it and then moving them on. Sometimes they just want to be told uh, that someone understands that they're struggling. Sometimes they just want to hear that. I understand. Okay, I'm going to pray with you and I'm going to pray for you. And if there's something that I can possibly do to try to help you along the way, just please let me know. All right? So, whether it's something petty or more serious, meet them with sympathy. Offer to support them in trying to resolve the matter. Then move on the conversation so they can't dwell on it for your own sake and theirs. All right? This is good information, good suggestions. Number two, bring their positivity back. You can try. Try, okay? So if you come to realize that this chronic complainer is struggling to find light in the darkness, offer them support. Didn't I just say that? Okay? Coach them through it. When they speak of something negatively, ask them why they feel so bothered by it. Listen to their answers, then help them unpack their reactions. Offer them genuine ideas that could help them to feel less negative. Suggest positive alternatives and different points of view that might make them see things differently and more rationally. You can try. Nothing beats a failure but a try. Okay? Number three, rise again, above. Rise above. Admittedly, some chronic complainers are just that, chronically overwhelmed and critical. You can't do everything, you can do everything you can to direct them and cheer them up, but ultimately, sometimes they're just crabby. That's crabby people. Okay? Let me read that again. You can do everything you can to redirect them and cheer them up, but ultimately, sometimes they're just crabby people. This can be incredibly draining on your own mental well being, and it can be. You have to take a break. Yes, you do. So if you find yourself stuck with a chronic complainer, try your best to detach from them. Keep your conversations short and sweet while staying civil. Don't argue, be level headed, then leave to maintain your own sanity. Now, that's some good advice. That's some good advice. And whether you super sensitive, super sympathetic, super empathetic, you have to put your mental well-being above everyone else's, because if you go to turn into uh what is it, a mental case, how in the world can you help someone else? Always think about taking care of yourself. We talk about that very often, okay? So if you don't want to come to the light side, let them stay in the dark. If they don't want to come to the light side, let them stay in the dark. Don't sacrifice yourself trying to convert them. And that's it for this learningmind.com. That's learning-mind.com. If they want to stay in the dark, you better come on to the light. Come to the light. Come to the light. Thank you so much. I am not going to go any further. I I believe we have done what we need to do today. Thank you so much for joining me. I appreciate your being here. And please enjoy the rest of your day, night, evening, afternoon, morning, midday, whichever it is. And let me hear from you, please, okay? Thank you so much. Enjoy the remainder of your, just what I said, okay? I love you.